I never imagined that the silence of a voice could teach me so much about the sound of love. I still remember the scent of the morning when everything changed. It had that crisp autumn air here in Vermont, with amber-colored leaves covering the ground like a handmade rug. It was just another ordinary Tuesday, until it wasn't. Sometimes, fate doesn't give warnings. It just shows up, knocks you over, and watches what's left behind. I woke up early that day because you had promised me pancakes. Your promises were always like that, small, sweet, but they carried so much weight in my heart. I laughed when you got all tangled up trying to flip the batter with one hand while holding the phone with the other, talking to your mom. That was our routine. Simple, noisy, real, and then, in a matter of minutes, everything turned into silence. You insisted on driving me to work, even though I said I was fine. And I joked, "Drive safe, love. I want to live a little longer to keep loving you." I swear I said that laughing, never imagining those would be the last words you'd hear from my lips for months. The curve was sharp. The car on the other side lost control. Seconds turned into dust. I remember the sound of glass shattering, the metallic taste in my mouth, and your hand trembling over mine before everything faded to black when I woke up. I didn't really wake up. At least, not that day. They told me later I slipped into a coma right there in the city hospital. That you stayed by my side every day. That your voice filled that white room with hope. But I didn't hear it. I didn't hear you crying softly while holding my hand. I didn't hear you arguing with the doctors, trying to stay strong. And I didn't hear you when you started recording voice messages, one a day, speaking to me like I was lying next to you, awake. Smiling. 6 months. 180 days. 180 different ways to say I love you without using the same words, but on the morning when my eyes finally opened, I felt completely emptied. I didn't know where I was. And worse, I didn't know who you were. You were sitting there beside my bed. You had a beard that didn't match your gentle face, and eyes that looked broken, like the world had collapsed inside you and you were still trying to piece it back together. "Hi, sweetheart," you said, with a smile trying to hide your fear, and I asked who you were. I remember the pause. The silence before your answer. As if each word had to be carefully chosen so you wouldn't fall apart right there in front of me. "I'm just someone who's loved you, forever." From that moment on, what had been love became a beginning. What had been certainty turned into doubt. And what had been memory became a mystery I needed to unravel. But in that moment, all I had was your gaze. And something inside me, something I couldn't name, told me I should trust it. If you also believe in the power of love, subscribe now to hear more stories like this one. Because sometimes, love means waiting without knowing what will come. I can't really explain what it feels like to wake up and not recognize the face of someone who clearly knows every part of you. There was something in his eyes, brown, deep, filled with something that felt too much like love for a stranger. But to me, in that moment, he was just that, a stranger with a trembling smile and a world of memories that no longer lived inside me. "My name is Daniel," he said, like someone introducing himself for the very first time, even though he had probably done it 1,000 times before. You're Emily. Emily Harper. And I'm your boyfriend." He said it gently, like he was afraid the words might scare me. Like love needed permission. Now that I looked at him, searching for something familiar, his voice, his face, the way he said my name. But nothing came. Just a soft emptiness. A blank page where our story used to be. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. So I nodded, slowly, even though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. Maybe I was just trying not to break him any more than he already seemed to be, and then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A phone. I recorded something for you, he whispered. Actually, a lot of things. He pressed play, and I heard it, his voice, from another time. Softer. Hopeful. Holding on to me through every word. Hey, Em. It's me again. Day 27. I dreamed you smiled last night. I hope that means something. I didn't know who that voice was speaking to. But I knew. I wanted to find her again, even if I had to fall in love with him from the beginning. I listened to his voice echoing through the hospital room, not the man sitting next to me, but a version of him I had never met. A Daniel who whispered to me through a recording, as if love could pass through time and sleep, and still find its way back to me. Every word carried a feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't just sadness or longing, it was something gentler. Like hope that had survived a storm. I miss your laugh, his voice said. It's the kind that fills a room even on your quiet days. You always said you didn't like it. That it was too loud, but I loved it because it meant you were real, you were here. And then, the voice paused, just breathing. And somehow, that silence said everything. Daniel didn't look at me while I listened. He stared at the floor, hands clasped, like he was afraid to look up and see that none of this was working, that the girl he loved was sitting right beside him and still felt 1,000 miles away, but something inside me was shifting. I didn't know that version of myself he was talking to, the girl who laughed too loud and loved pancakes and always forgot where she put her phone. But I wanted to know her. I wanted to meet her again, through him. After the recording ended, I didn't say much. I just looked at him and asked, "How long did you wait?" His eyes met mine, and I saw the weight of every single day he'd counted. 180 days, he said. Every day, I came. I talked to you. Told you what I made for dinner, or how the neighbor's dog kept digging up the backyard. Some days I read your favorite book out loud. Some days I just sat and listened to your breathing. I think that's how I survived. He said it so simply, like love was meant to be patient, even in silence, even in fear, and in that moment I realized something. I didn't remember our love. But I could feel it, not in my mind, but somewhere deeper, a soft ache in my chest, a pull in my stomach, a warmth in my fingers that made me want to reach for him. I didn't know how to go back to who I was before the accident. But maybe I didn't need to. Maybe love could begin again, not from memory, but from something even stronger. Presence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hospital was quiet, except for the soft beeping of machines and the distant murmur of nurses passing through the halls. But inside my chest, everything felt loud, not with fear or confusion, but with something I hadn't felt since waking up. Curiosity. Longing. A strange, quiet pull toward a life I didn't remember. But maybe still belonged to. Daniel hadn't stayed late. After the recording, he smiled at me, a soft, careful smile, and said, "I'll be back tomorrow. Same time. I'll bring more recordings, if you want." And I'd nodded, not because I remembered him, but because when he said he'd come back, I believed him. Lying in that hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of love could survive this kind of silence. What kind of man waits every day for someone who might never come back? Leaves pieces of himself in the form of audio recordings, stories, confessions, bits of hope, without ever knowing if she'll hear them. I didn't know Daniel. But I knew his love. And maybe that was more important. The next morning, he came just like he said he would. This time with coffee in one hand and a tiny notebook in the other. I used to write in this, he said, holding it out to me like it was something sacred. Little things you used to say. Places we wanted to go. Grocery lists. Doodles. It's not in any order. But it's you. Us. I opened it carefully, as if the pages might break. Inside were scribbles in two handwritings, mine and his. I didn't recognize my own writing. But there was something oddly comforting about it. One page had a list of baby names. Another had a quick sketch of a beach with the words, our someday place. One page simply read, remind me to tell you every day that I love you. Underneath, in his handwriting, he'd written, you never needed the reminder. But I needed to say it. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But there was something so gentle about that moment that I just breathed it in. Daniel didn't pressure me. He didn't try to make me remember. He just sat with me, telling me little stories. Like how I used to talk to plants and name them ridiculous things, that our aloe vera plant was named Carl. That I hated olives but loved olive oil. That my favorite sound was the coffee maker at 7 a.m. Every detail felt like a thread stitching something back together inside me. I don't know how long it'll take, I whispered, not even sure what I was asking. It doesn't matter. He said softly, I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time since waking up, I believed that maybe I wasn't lost, maybe I was just finding my way back. The third recording he played for me changed something. It started like the others, with a gentle hey, and a quiet pause. But this one, it felt different. His voice cracked in the middle. Not because he was trying to be dramatic, but because whatever he had felt that day had spilled over the edge. Day 61, he said. I saw a woman at the park today wearing your sweater. That one with the little sunflowers on the sleeves. You always said it was ugly cute. God, I hated it. But now, I would give anything to see you wear it again. There was a silence. And then, I miss arguing with you over dumb things. Over pineapple on pizza. Over whether we should get a dog or a cat first. You always said cats were more independent, probably because you didn't want to compete with another needy soul in the house. And then he laughed. It was so real, the kind of laugh that comes from remembering something that once annoyed you and now feels precious. I miss everything, the noise you made when you found your charger. The way you'd hum in the car without realizing. Even your grumpy face when you hadn't had coffee yet. I didn't say anything while the recording played. I just sat there, holding that little notebook he'd given me, now open to a page with my name written a dozen times in messy cursive, like someone practicing how to never forget. When it ended, Daniel didn't ask if I remembered. He didn't look at me like he expected something magical to happen. He just looked present. Still. Like he would keep showing up whether the memories came back or not, and in that stillness, I found something comforting. I wasn't in love with him. Not yet. But I was beginning to love the way he waited. That day, I asked if we could go outside. Just for a little while. The nurse helped me into a wheelchair, and Daniel pushed me down a path behind the hospital that led to a tiny garden, nothing special, just some benches, a tree or two, and the sound of birds singing like they had no idea anything was wrong in the world. We sat in silence for a while. He didn't speak, and I didn't need him to. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my skin. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I imagined something, not a memory, but a picture. A kitchen. Laughter. Someone flipping pancakes and making a mess. Me, sitting at a counter, smiling. I opened my eyes and turned to him. Did you used to make pancakes on Tuesdays? He froze. Just for a second, then, every single Tuesday. And he smiled, not the careful kind. Not the broken one. A real one. And for the first time since I woke up, I smiled back. It's strange how the heart remembers what the mind forgets. That night, I dreamed of him, not exactly his face, or the hospital, or even our voices, but a feeling. The warmth of falling asleep with someone beside you. The way skin brushes skin, barely touching, but enough to say I'm here. Enough to say don't go. When I woke up, the feeling lingered like morning fog, soft, hazy, and gone too soon. I turned my head, expecting to see him in the chair like always, but the chair was empty. For the first time in days, Daniel was late. The nurse said he'd called, that he was on his way, but something in me shifted. I felt his absence in my chest like a misplaced heartbeat. Maybe I was getting used to him. Or maybe I was starting to need him. When he finally walked through the door, hair windblown and cheeks red from the cold, he held up a paper bag. Rain. Check on pancakes, he said, grinning. But I brought you something almost as good. He handed me a cinnamon roll the size of my hand, still warm, wrapped in bakery paper that smelled like vanilla and home. You remembered I like cinnamon? I asked, without thinking. He blinked, startled. Yeah, you used to love it. I didn't tell him the truth. That I didn't remember at all. But my body did, the way my mouth watered, the way my hands unwrapped it like muscle memory. He sat beside me, not too close, letting me eat in peace. And when I was done, I asked, will you play me another recording? He nodded. No hesitation, this one was different again. Not a voice memo. A song, his voice singing. Soft, unsure, beautiful. You used to beg me to sing, he said, scratching the back of his neck. I always said no. But one day, I just did it. For you. The song was simple. Just a guitar and his voice, whispering something about waiting, about rain, about how love doesn't disappear, it only changes shape. By the end of it, my hands were shaking. And I didn't know if it was the music, or the memory fighting its way through the fog. I looked at him and whispered, did I love you very much? His eyes found mine. He didn't smile this time. You loved like it was the only thing that ever mattered, he said. And I loved you like it was the only thing I ever knew how to do. The silence after those words wasn't emptied, it was full of old echoes. And maybe, the beginning of something new. The days began to blend together, not in a way that felt repetitive, but like layers gently folding into one another. Every morning, Daniel arrived with something small, a new recording, a memory, a book I used to love. He never brought pressure. Only presence. And slowly, I started to look forward to that presence more than I dared to admit. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. He would sit beside me while I colored in pages from a floral adult coloring book the nurse gave me. I wasn't very good at it, but the movement calmed my hands. Daniel would just sit there, watching me with a kind of quiet joy, as if seeing me hold a pencil again was a miracle in itself. "You used to draw," he said one afternoon, his voice barely louder than the sound of the pencil on paper. "Mostly silly things. Cats with hats. Plants that talked. Once, you drew me as a superhero with a cape made out of pancakes." I laughed without thinking, a soft, surprised sound that made his eyes light up. Like a light turned on in a room we thought was locked. But the truth was, my mind was still empty in places I longed to fill. Sometimes I closed my eyes and forced myself to try. To dig into the fog and pull out anything. A sound. A scent. A moment, nothing came. Not yet, and yet, it was getting easier to imagine the version of me he loved. One night, after he'd left, I asked the nurse for the recordings. I told her I wanted to listen to them alone. She smiled, and for the first time, I saw her eyes soften in a way I hadn't noticed before. "He really does love you, you know," she said, handing me the phone. "We've all seen it. It's rare, the way he's stayed." When I was alone, I pressed play on the first one. "Day 1, his voice said. "You're asleep, and I don't know if you'll ever hear this. But I have to talk to you anyway, or I'll lose my mind." The first few messages were raw. Full of disbelief. Sadness that trembled at the edges. But there was also something else, awe. Even in his grief, he sounded amazed by me. By what we had. By the depth of a love that could hold through silence. Day 9. "I brought your favorite sweater. Left it on the chair, just in case you get cold. I don't know why. It's not like you can reach for it. But it felt wrong not to." Day 15. "Your mom made lasagna today. The one you always said was better than mine. I didn't argue this time." Day 21. "I read Little Women out loud. You always cried when Beth got sick. I had to stop." My voice cracked. Each recording added a new brushstroke to a picture I couldn't fully see yet, but was beginning to feel. And then I got to day 40-5. It was different. "Hey, Em. Today I realized something. Even if you never wake up, I'll still love you. Not because I'm waiting for something in return, but because loving you is who I am now." I paused the message. Let the words settle. That was the first time I cried since waking up, not because I remembered, but because I didn't want to forget this version of love, the kind that stays, even when nothing else does. I think the first time I reached for his hand, it surprised us both. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was just instinct. We were sitting outside again, the little hospital garden, with its stubborn patches of sun and stubborn birds that sang louder than they should. Daniel was telling me a story. About the time we tried to build a bookshelf together and ended up with 3 extra screws and no idea where they were supposed to go. "You said we should just call it abstract furniture," he said, laughing softly. "Then you made me pancakes to make up for the disaster." He was holding a photo, the two of us, covered in paint and sawdust, smiling at the camera like we had just won something. My hair was shorter. His beard was gone. We looked younger. Lighter. As he passed the photo to me, our fingers brushed. And I didn't pull away. In fact, I did something I hadn't done before. I held on, not tightly. Just enough. Enough to say don't let go. He looked at me with that same expression he always wore when something small meant everything, eyes wide, heart open, breath caught in his throat, and in that moment, I felt it, not memory. Not recognition. But connection, something in me trusted him, not because of what we had, but because of what we still could have. Later, back in my room, I stared at that photo again. I traced the outline of the smile on my face. The way my arm looped so easily around his waist. There was nothing in the image that unlocked a memory. No flood of familiarity. But I wasn't looking for that anymore. Now, I just wanted to know who I had been with him. I turned to him that evening and asked, "What did you love most about me?" Before? He paused, like the question was almost too heavy to lift. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice softer than usual. "You didn't hide," he said. "When you loved something, a book, a person, a moment, you lit up. You didn't hold back. You made everything feel like it mattered." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was too thick. "But he wasn't done, and you believed in me," he whispered. "Even when I didn't believe in myself. You made me want to be more. Not for you, but because you saw more in me than I ever did." That night, I listened to more recordings, not in order, just randomly. One from day 72 made me laugh out loud. "You used to say I looked like a golden retriever when I was excited." I'm not sure if that was meant as a compliment, but I took it as one. Another one, from day 90, nearly broke me. "I'm scared," he said. "Not just that you won't wake up, but that you will, and you won't remember me. That I'll be a stranger to you, and all of this, everything we were, will disappear in your eyes." I wanted to reach through time and hold that version of him. I wanted to tell him I heard it. All of it. Even if it took me months to understand, and more than anything, I wanted him to know that even if my memory never came back, something else had, something just as real. It happened during a thunderstorm, the kind that rolls in out of nowhere, fast, wild, unapologetic. I was sitting by the window in my hospital room, watching the rain streak across the glass. Daniel had just come in, water dripping from his coat, hair soaked, shoes squeaking slightly on the floor. "You walked here?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged, smiling. "You know me. Rains never scared me." I didn't know him. Not really. But I wanted to. I wanted to remember what it felt like to know someone so well that their quirks were like second nature, predictable, cherished, familiar. He sat beside me, his jacket hanging on the edge of the chair. The storm outside made the world feel quieter somehow. Like time had slowed just enough for us to breathe without rushing. "I brought another message," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "It's short. But it's from a good day." He pressed play, day 100. And 3, his voice echoed through the tiny speaker. "You smiled today. I swear you did." The nurse said it was probably just a reflex, but I don't care. It gave me hope. I looked at him. Was it real? The smile? He nodded. It was small. Barely there. But yeah, it was real. I wanted To believe that meant something. That somewhere deep inside me, I'd heard his voice, felt his presence, and my body responded before my mind could catch up. You know, I said slowly, I don't remember the beginning of us. But I don't think I need to anymore. He didn't move. Just waited, because I think we're writing a new version. Right now. His eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them again, they were full of tears, yes, but also of something steadier than hope, trust. I reached out, touching his wrist. Tell me something I said to you once. Something small. Random. He laughed gently, wiping at his face. You once told me that falling in love was like finding the same song playing in someone else's head. That sounds like something I'd say, I whispered. He looked at me. It was exactly who you were. The storm rumbled outside, but inside the room, it was calm. Safe. Warmed. I didn't have all the answers. My past was still a blurred painting, beautiful in places, blank in others. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity: Daniel was no longer a stranger to me. He was a heartbeat I'd started to recognize. A rhythm I wanted to follow, and even if I never remembered the love we once had, I was ready to fall in love with him all over again. Some days still felt like walking through fog. There were mornings when I woke up hopeful, full of quiet wonder about who I used to be, about who we could become. And then there were others when the weight of what I didn't remember pressed down on me like winter air, thick, cold, impossible to shake off. But Daniel never changed. He didn't flinch when I asked the same question twice. He didn't sigh. When I forgot the name of the park he said we used to go to every Saturday. He didn't show disappointment when my mind refused to light up in all the places he'd once lived inside. He simply stayed. I'm not here to make you remember me, he said once, as he helped me walk down the hallway during physical therapy. I'm here to walk beside you while you figure out who you are now. That was the day I realized love didn't have to look like what it used to. Love, sometimes, looks like patience. Like showing up even when the story has changed. That afternoon, we sat on the hospital lawn under a tree just beginning to bloom again. He brought out something wrapped in an old napkin, 2 paper rings. You made these, he explained, his smile shy. You said you didn't believe in traditional things. You said if we ever got married, you'd want it to be in the backyard, barefoot, wearing something ridiculous like overalls. I laughed, surprised by how easily the sound escaped me. That actually sounds like me. He handed me one of the rings. I turned it over in my hand, the paper soft and yellowed at the edges. Did we ever talk about marriage? I asked. He nodded. You said you didn't need it. That what we had was already enough. But then, one day, out of nowhere, you made these and said, here. I changed my mind. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I didn't remember that moment. But I could feel the truth of it in my bones, the kind of woman who made paper rings. The kind of man who kept them. I slid the ring onto my finger. It barely fit, crumpled and worn. But it felt more permanent than anything gold or silver could offer. Do you think we'll ever be like we were before? I asked him quietly. He didn't answer right away. He reached for my hand instead, resting it between his palms. I don't want to go back, he said. I want to go forward. With you. As you are now. And I believed him. I end that moment, under that tree, with a paper ring on my finger and a storm of uncertainty in my heart. I believed that we could begin again, not by remembering, but by choosing. The hospital released me on a Wednesday. There was no ceremony, no big goodbye, just a nurse handing me a folder of instructions, a doctor explaining follow-ups, and Daniel waiting patiently by the door, holding my favorite cardigan. The one with the tiny sunflowers I still didn't remember buying. I stood there for a moment, staring at the world beyond the automatic doors. Everything felt new and painfully familiar at the same time, as if I had been gone for years, and now had to learn how to live again in a place that once belonged to me. You ready? Daniel asked, his voice soft, careful. No, I said honestly. But let's go anyway. The drive home was quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because every street, every tree, every corner felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting for me to recognize it, I didn't, but I noticed things, the way Daniel reached for my hand at red lights. The way he glanced at me, not with expectation, but with gentleness. The way he still hummed along to the radio, even when the song wasn't one he liked. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the house, a small, white cottage with chipped paint and wind chimes by the porch. It was the kind of house you don't just live in, you build a life inside it. This was ours? I whispered. He nodded. Still is. If you want it to be. Inside, everything looked like it had been waiting. The books on the shelves. The photos on the walls. A single sunflower. In a vase by the kitchen window, there was a couch with a blanket thrown across it like someone had just gotten up. A coffee mug beside a book titled The Art of Doing Nothing. And on the fridge, a note in handwriting that looked like mine. Don't forget, love lives here. I stood frozen. I didn't touch much, Daniel said behind me. I kept it like you left it. Just in case. I turned slowly, scanning every detail, and then said something I hadn't expected to say. Will you show me around? He smiled, not the big, triumphant kind. The quiet, grateful kind that said, yes, I'll walk beside you. Always, room by room, he told me our story. This is where we painted the walls and accidentally stepped in the tray. You left footprints. 4 days. This is where you used to dance in your socks and slide across the floor. This is where we sat during the blackout and made shadow puppets until the candles melted. And then we came to a small room in the back, cozy, filled with plants and light. This was your space, he said. You wrote here. You read. You cried here when things got hard. I touched the windowsill. It feels like me. Even if I don't remember. He looked at me then, not with sadness, but with something brighter. Then that's enough for now. I didn't say it aloud. But I felt it so clearly. Maybe I didn't need to remember the life we had, maybe. I just needed to keep living it. The first night back home didn't feel like home. The walls were familiar, but I wasn't. The bed felt too big, the sheets too soft, and the silence heavier than it had ever been in the hospital. There, the noise was constant, the rhythm of life mechanical and expected. But here everything waited for me to feel again. Daniel had set up the guest room for me. Gave me space. He didn't assume. He didn't push. If you're not comfortable, he said gently, you can always change your mind. About anything. But I didn't want to leave. I wanted to see what my life had looked like when I wasn't a stranger inside it, that night. I lay in bed listening to the wind tapping against the windows, the creak of wood settling, the soft hum of a house alive with memories. I couldn't sleep. So I wandered. I found myself in the living room again, barefoot, wearing one of his sweatshirts I'd borrowed from a drawer labeled Emily's stuff. Even though I didn't remember picking it out years ago, it fit me perfectly. He was in the kitchen, quietly washing a dish. He turned when he saw me. Can't sleep? I shook my head. Can I sit with you for a bit? He dried his hands and nodded. We settled onto the couch, a quiet warmth between us. Not romantic. Not tense. Just safe. I found your recordings again, I said softly. He looked down. You listened to all of them? Almost. I saved the last one. He glanced at me, surprised. Why? I shrugged. Because I think I want to be ready before I hear how it ends. He didn't push me to explain. Instead, he handed me a blanket and said, You used to call this your thinking blanket. Every time something overwhelmed you, you'd curl up in it like you were building a fortress. I smiled and wrapped it around me. It smelled like lavender and thyme. We sat there for a long while. I leaned my head on the back of the couch. And then, quietly, I asked, Were we happy? He turned to me slowly, his eyes reflecting every season. We'd survived together. We weren't perfect, he said. But yes, we were really happy. Even in the ordinary. Especially there. I closed my eyes and let the silence between us become something softer than stillness, something like belonging. When I opened them again, I found myself asking the question I had been holding back for weeks. Do you think I could fall in love with you again? He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just nodded, one small, sure motion, and whispered, I think, you already are. There was no defining moment. No sudden rush of memory. No magical flicker of recognition. Just quiet moments, strung together, like pearls on a thread I hadn't noticed we'd been weaving all along. It started in the kitchen. Daniel was making coffee, humming some old tune under his breath, barefoot in plaid pajama pants. The sunlight hit his face just right, and something about it, the curve of his smile, the easy way he moved in the space, made me freeze. I didn't remember the moment. But I felt it. Like déjà vu soaked in warmth. Later that day, I opened a drawer looking for a pen and found a tiny box of birthday candles, all different shapes and colors. On the side was a post-it in my handwriting, because we celebrate even the small things. And I smiled. It wasn't a recovered memory. It was something better. A reminder of who I used to be. Who I still was, beneath all the forgetting. Daniel saw it in my eyes. The shift. You okay? He asked gently. I think I'm remembering without remembering, I said. He nodded like he understood, like he'd been waiting for exactly that. We spent the afternoon in the garden. He showed me how to tend the herbs, how I used to name each one. That's Lucy, he said, pointing to a particularly stubborn basil plant. You once said she had main character energy. We laughed. Real, belly-deep laughter. The kind that comes from the soul, not the mind. As the sun began to set, he reached for my hand, slowly, deliberately, and I didn't hesitate this time, fingers laced. Heart steady. No words needed. I looked at him, and I didn't see a stranger anymore. I saw home, that night, as we sat on the couch with tea and soft music playing low in the background. I finally picked up the phone, the last recording. I said, Can I hear it? Daniel hesitated. His hand trembled slightly as he tapped to find the file. Then he placed the phone on the table between us and hit play. Day 180, his voice said, quieter than ever. Today's the last one. Not because I'm giving up, but because I think it's time to let go of waiting and just keep loving you, wherever you are. I watched him carefully. His head was bowed slightly, eyes closed, listening like he was hearing it for the first time, too. I don't know if you'll ever wake up, the recording continued. But if you do, and if you forget me, I just hope you know that I stayed. That I never left. That love doesn't disappear when memory fades. It lives in the way we show up. In the way we hold space for someone. In the quiet promise that we'll be here, even if they don't remember why. There was a pause. And then, if you're hearing this, it means you came back. And if you're sitting there with me right now, maybe not knowing who I am, that's okay. Another pause, because I'll love you, Emily Harper. Even if I have to meet you for the first time every day. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't feel broken. I felt held, like love had waited patiently, not for my memory, but for my heart. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, not silent, but full of gentle, living sounds. The creak of wood, the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator. And somewhere, just outside my window, birds starting to remember how to sing again. I sat up in bed, holding the blanket Daniel had tucked around me the night before. The one he said I used to steal off his side when I got cold. The one that still smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. I got up and walked barefoot through the house, trailing my fingers across the walls, touching doorknobs like I was saying hello to every memory that had once lived there. When I reached the kitchen, Daniel was already there, hair messy, mug in hand, wearing a sweatshirt that probably had my name written somewhere inside it. He looked up and smiled. Good morning. I walked straight to him. No hesitation. No doubt. Good morning, I said. And then, before I could think twice, I added, you waited so long for me. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me with eyes that had held months of silent prayers, and now, finally, an answer. I would have waited longer, he whispered. I touched his chest, right over his heart. I may not remember all of it, but I know it lives here. Somewhere. He covered my hand with his. You don't need to remember everything. You just have to feel it. And I did. I felt it in the quiet way he looked at me. In the stories he told me without forcing them. In the way he never made me feel broken. Only becoming. That afternoon, we went back to the park where the accident had happened. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because I needed to reclaim it. The road had been repaved. The tree that once stood by the curve was gone, replaced by a younger one, still learning how to grow. We stood at the edge of the path in silence. Daniel reached for my hand. This is where I almost lost you, he said quietly, and this is where you started loving me, again and again, I replied. He looked at me, not with surprise, but with awe. As if hearing those words from me was a kind of miracle he hadn't dared to hope for. I don't know if I'll ever remember all the details, I told him, voice steady now. But I remember you. He blinked, fighting back emotion. That's all I ever wanted. We stayed there a while longer, not talking. Just breathing. Just being. By the time we left, the sky had turned gold, and the light hit us like a blessing. Later, back home, I sat in front of the mirror in what used to be my writing room. I looked at my reflection and saw something new, not the girl who had lost everything, but the woman who had found something just as powerful, a love that didn't depend on memory. A love that chose, every day, to stay. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden flood of memories. No dramatic scene where everything rushed back in perfect order, but day by day, moment by moment, pieces of me returned, not always as memories, sometimes as sensations. A smell that made my chest ache. A song that made my eyes water for no clear reason. A word Daniel said that sparked warmth in places I didn't know I'd lost. We never treated those moments like answers. We treated them like gifts, little miracles. The first time I cooked for him again, I forgot how to use the old waffle maker and burned half the batter. Daniel didn't say a word, just smiled and took a bite of the burnt edge like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Later that night, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance across the yard, he whispered, "You used to do this. You know. Watch the lights and make wishes on them like they were stars." What did I wish for? I asked. He looked at me and said, "More time." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I turned to him and asked, "Do you still have the paper ring?" Without hesitation, he pulled it from his pocket. "Always." I reached for it, gently sliding it back onto my finger. This time, not as a symbol of what we had lost, but of everything we'd found again. "I want to write again," I told him. "Not stories from before. Stories from now." He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell ours." So I did. I started writing it like this, like a letter to myself. A memory in progress. A confession of a love so stubborn, it waited without asking for anything in return. A love that sat beside my silence, held my hand through fear, and stayed until I was ready to begin again. I wrote about the accident, the recordings, the days I didn't know who I was. And I wrote about him, the man who reminded me, gently, who I could still be now. When people ask me how I fell in love, I don't say, "It started years ago, in a coffee shop," with a smile and a pancake joke. I say, "It started the day I woke up, and he was still there," because that's what love really is, isn't it? It's not just grand gestures or perfect moments. It's someone showing up when you forget who you are, and loving you until you remember, not with pressure, not with expectation, but with patience and presence and grace. So if you're listening to this, wondering if love can survive the darkest of seasons, let me tell you, it can, and sometimes, it comes back even stronger.